We wanted to get started with our speaker. As all of you probably would know, if you'd been able to get outside at all since you've been here, you'd know that Charleston is actually a very large port city, and we are really only steps from Charleston Harbor, which is one of the great natural harbors on the east coast of the United States. And so with that in mind, and in light of the fact that our last meeting was in Panama and we had our visit to the Panama Canal, we wanted to also make you aware of the importance of the port in Charleston and of the Panama Canal to shipping in our region. So on that, Jim Newsome was named President and Chief Executive Officer of the South Carolina State Ports Authority in 2009, and is only the 5th leader in the history of the 73-year-old organization. Previously, he was the first non-German president of Hapag-Lloyd American, part of the world's 5th largest ocean shipping company, where he was responsible for all activities in North America and Latin America. Under Mr. Newsome's leadership, the Port of Charleston's cargo volume has grown 52% compared with the 25% growth rate for other U.S. ports. It is ranked the #1 fastest growing port in the United States and is ranked the #9 container port in the nation. Currently, Mr. Newsome is overseeing the deepening of Charleston Harbor to 52 feet, the deepest on the East Coast, in order to accommodate the new generation of post-Panamax vessels. Mr. Newsome is a native of Savannah, Georgia, which is just about 90 miles down the coast from us, where his father was an executive with the Georgia Ports Authority for 25 years. It's a pleasure to introduce you, my friend, Jim Newsome.
Good afternoon, and thanks for having me today. We normally try to provide hospitality in Charleston, but I realize the weather didn't exactly do that during these days, so I'm sorry about that, and I hope you will still have some time to look around and see this beautiful city that we have. So as Pierre said, I joined the port in 2009. Before that, I was 30 years in the ocean container shipping industry, so I was a customer of a port like Charleston. I worked for a German company, Hapag-Lloyd, was actually at the end of my career there responsible for Latin America as well as North America. So I traveled extensively through Latin America. It's one of my favorite parts of the world. And also we had extensive, we were like the 2nd or 3rd largest shipping line customer of the Panama Canal. So we have had a lot of interaction with the Panama Canal over many years and continue to do so today. So 2 things I will say: I never thought I would run a port. And being from Savannah, I never thought I would run a port in Charleston, South Carolina. That's almost like that's a tremendous rivalry, if you can understand that in the framework of your own country. So the port, what I would say to you is that unlike the ports in your country, which are mainly landlord ports, the public sector owns the ports and they typically franchise those to a private sector operator. We in the southeast and the Gulf of this country tend to own and operate the port. So the state is the owner and the operator of the port. And it may sound strange to you, but that allows us to be very efficient. We have our own crane operators, our own machine operators, and we provide the highest level of productivity of any port in the United States, which is a good thing because productivity impacts cost. As you can imagine, a port in a state like South Carolina or a state in a manufacturing and population growing region is a big deal. Today in the world of global manufacturing, global sourcing, businesses locate near ports. We have lots of examples of that in this state. Michelin tires, BMW, automobiles, most recently Volvo cars, Businesses, typically most new manufacturing today is on a global manufacturing platform, and those businesses want to be near a port. So it's a good situation for us if we can meet the challenges that it takes to be in this business. So as Pierre said, there are 10 major container ports in the United States. They handle about 90% of the container volume in the United States. That's about 42 million TEUs. We measure in 20-foot containers, although most containers you'll see on the road are 40-foot containers, so those are 2 TEUs. We're number 9, we're about 2 million TEUs. Long Beach is about 8 million TEUs, to give you some perspective. Shanghai is about 36 million TEUs. So we're actually the 82nd largest in the world. And it is a fact that over the years, the U.S. ports as a percentage of global port business has declined in a way. We're only about 8% of the worldwide port throughput today because of the tremendous growth of manufacturing and sourcing in China. I think 8 of the top 10 ports in the world are in China. So it's tremendously concentrated there. So businesses want to be here. We are growing well above the market, and I think the reason for that is really twofold. I think the Southeast is the best place to be in the port industry in this country for 2 reasons. Number one, there's a lot of population growth here. Imported cargo from Asia, retail goods go to where people live. And the reality in the United States is that very few businesses move from South Carolina back to the Northeast or South Carolina back to the Midwest. The weather's good here, the living conditions are good here. Businesses want, most of the time, except the last 2 or 3 days. So businesses want to be in the South. Good cost of living, good labor force, we have a good power, a lot going for us here. So that drives imports. And we are the region where people want to manufacture in this country. So in the last 15 years, we've outsourced a lot of manufacturing to Asia. A lot of that is coming back today. As you know, the wages in China are not so advantageous anymore. There are a lot of logistical limitations in China in terms of connectivity to the interior and how that works with the ports. So there's a lot of foreign investment that needs to come here. So we are the region of foreign direct investment in this country. Again, Volvo cars, lots of other projects that are going to start manufacturing here for global manufacturing reasons. So that it puts us in a very good position. And what I tell people, they say, how much are you going to grow in the port? Well, I don't know. I'm not an economist. The best economist is the one-handed economist, right? Because they can't keep saying on the other hand. They don't always contradict themselves. But I say that this region will grow twice as fast as the U.S. port market because of the good fundamentals here. So we're in a good situation, and we need to keep it that way. The biggest challenge that we face in the port industry today is the size of ships that are being operated in the world. So the Panama Canal, where you visited last year and you saw the Miraflores locks, the limit in size of ship is 5,000 TEUs. That's the biggest ship that can go through the Panama Canal today. That's 13 containers across, basically. Ships today are being built that are 20,000 TEUs, so 4 times the capacity. Obviously not 4 times the length. Certainly not. They get wider, basically. They get a little bit deeper. They get taller. We see ships today of 8 to 10,000 TEUs. We see about 11. We have 31 container ships a week. About 11 of those are bigger than can go through the Panama Canal today. We're preparing for a time where really we have all ships that are too big to go through today's Panama Canal. And that's why the Panama Canal is being expanded. You saw that last year. It's an impressive project. It's a $5.2 billion project. Those of you from Panama will realize that project was approved by the vote of less than 100,000 people in Panama, basically. It was a public referendum that enabled that project to be done. And that's really a game changer for the East Coast port industry because it means that big container ships can come through the Panama Canal. So 70% of the traffic through the Panama Canal is between the East Coast of the United States and Europe, basically. So it's a big deal for the East Coast here. So we'll see 8,000 to 10,000 TEU ships as the workhorse, so twice the size that can go through the Panama Canal today, and ships up to 14,000 TEUs will be coming to the East Coast here within the next 2 years. So the two constraints on that are, again, the widened Panama Canal. Panama Canal was supposed to be completed mid next year. They now have discovered a crack, a longitudinal crack in the new locks. So they have to fix that, so that might be a 6-month delay. And there's another constraint, which is the Bayonne Bridge in New Jersey. So if you've been to New Jersey, there's a bridge there called the Bayonne Bridge, which is 151 feet of height, or about 47 meters of height. And that height is a constraint for big ships. So that bridge is being raised to 215 feet, basically. That was also supposed to be completed by mid next year. We just found out this weekend that that's delayed for about a year. So, but within 2 years' time, we will see really, really big container ships here, because that's what's efficient for the shipping lines to operate. The bottom line is that the only real lever to reduce costs of operation in container shipping is bigger ships and utilizing them fully to reduce the slot cost, basically. So really everything we do in the ports is geared to handle big container ships. And so what does that mean for us? Well, it means that when we built our most modern container terminal here back in the mid-70s, we thought ships would not be bigger than 2,000 or 3,000 TEUs. And we built them accordingly. So imagine now, imagine having to handle a ship of 14,000 TEUs. So everything's bigger. Cranes have to be taller. Outreach of cranes more. Weight stress on the crane more. The pilings on the wharf have to be strengthened. The fendering systems have to be strengthened. So every dimension of our container terminals has to be improved to handle this. And the reality of life is that the ships came quicker than we could improve our facilities. So if you know about, you're from this country, if you know about permitting, you know nothing happens quickly in terms of getting a permit to build something new. So if you want to build a new ship, you can order and build and receive a new ship in 3 years' time. If you want to build a new container terminal, if you want to deepen a harbor, that can historically take up to 15 or 20 years' time. So there was a tremendous catch-up that had to be done by the ports to meet this almost unanticipated challenges of big ships. I would have told you in about 1999 in the container shipping industry, I had a lot less gray hair then, by the way. I had more black hair then. That you would not see ships bigger than 7,000 or 8,000 TEUs. That would be the limit. Now, again, we're building 20,000 TEU ships. Fortunately, I don't think they're going to get any bigger than that. I simply think, like the 747 airplane, the A380, I think they reach a size where they simply cannot get bigger. So we're working methodically to improve our terminals. And what does that mean? We're spending as a port $1 billion in the next 5 years in terms of new investment in our facilities. The most significant of which is we're building a completely new terminal, about 100-hectare terminal at the former Navy base here, which will cost close to $800 or $900 million when we finish it, basically, which will add about 50% to our capacity, will enable us to handle big ships. We have to redo our existing terminal at the Wando terminal to be able to handle big ships. We have cranes 115 feet high today. We're buying cranes 155 feet high today because the ships are getting that much bigger. So that's a significant investment. Really significant if you think that you're building 30 or 40-year assets and you don't know what world trade is going to do. I mean, I would have told you 3 or 4 years ago world trade would grow 10 or 15%. It's not growing that fast anymore. Certainly what's happening in the China economy today, if you understood that, you can make a lot of money. Nobody understands what's happening in China today. They're taking a pause right now. We don't think that that's going to last forever. We think China will always manufacture and consume, and we're banking on that. So we're investing $1 billion in our facilities. We're also working with the federal government to deepen our harbor. So the harbors in this country, although they are existing in states, they're owned by the federal government. So we work with the Army Corps of Engineers to deepen our harbor to 15.8 meters of depth, or 52 feet, which will make us the deepest harbor on the East Coast by the end of this decade. And I say they're federal harbors, but the nice thing about our federal government, they can own something and still expect you as a state to pay the lion's share of it. So we are actually paying 60% of the cost to deepen our harbor, which will be another $300 million, basically. So the port is an investment game. I mean, we are compelled to invest a lot of money to remain in the top 10 in the container business. And quite frankly, and maybe it's the same in the newspaper business or in the publishing, in the media business, if you're not in the top 10 today, there's probably little chance that you can be in the top 10 in the future. You just don't have the critical mass to compete and be relevant. It's not like a port that's 20th in this country is going to become the number 4 port. I just don't see that happening. So we invest with a lot of confidence that the trade in this region is going to continue to grow. But it's not, we have a saying, build it and they will come. It's not build it and they will come. We also work very hard to create a cargo base. So how do we convince people to build infrastructure whereby we can handle more cargo, be it rail facilities, be it warehouses, transloading facilities, things that enable us to aggregate cargo here and grow our cargo base. You might not believe it, but 2 of the biggest growing areas of freight, and some that are very much impacting Latin America because we export a lot from here to Latin America, are agriculture products, which come from the Midwest. They're not close to any port, so they can go to any port that has containers and facilities to handle it. So we're handling a lot of exported agriculture products in containers today. And we're preparing to handle plastics in containers. And you would, knowing this part of the country, you'd say, well, there's no plastics manufacturing in the southeast of the United States. It's all in Houston and New Orleans and the U.S. Gulf, because with the plunging price of natural gas in the last 5 years, all of the manufacturing that was going to go to the Middle East is now coming back to the U.S. So they're adding a lot of capacity in Houston and New Orleans to make plastics for export. There's not enough ship capacity and water depth in the Gulf port, so a lot of that cargo is going to come over here. So we're working with the railroads, working with private sector companies to build facilities that can transload that cargo and put it into containers here. So, we think long-term, the future growth in our ports is export-related. Simply because we're a mature economy here, that's what drives imports, is only so many flat-screen TVs you can have, only so many new suits you can have. We see exporting to the emerging market economies being the real growth area in the future for this region. So we're preparing for that. So there's a great deal that goes on in the port industry today, a lot of challenges. Again, we're investing a lot of money. We have to be able to, although the state owns the port, the port exists on its own economic basis. We have to earn money or borrow it, or we can't invest. So we are a big business, and I'm going to go see a shipping line client who came from Geneva, Switzerland today to see us, and they want reduced rates. And I'm going to talk to them about increasing our rates. So that's the normal tension that exists in business, and we feel we offer a good product. Again, we're the most productive port here in the United States. So we handle 2 major cargo segments. We handle containerized cargo. That's about 80% of our business, and we handle about 15% of roll-on, roll-off cargo and non-container cargo, the biggest part of which is BMW. BMW exports 240,000 vehicles a year through our port, and that will grow. So if you own an X5 or an X4 or an X3 in your country, it was made in Spartanburg, South Carolina. That's what a global manufacturing platform is. 1 out of 4 BMWs driven in the world were made in South Carolina, believe it or not. And then Volvo Cars is going to build a plant here. By 2018, they'll export another 100,000 vehicles. So manufacturing investment is key for a port. I mean, you cannot duplicate the cargo flows that come from manufacturing investment. So it's an exciting time to be in the port industry. We face a lot of challenges every day. We employ about 500 people. Transportation in this country is kind of an aging workforce in the sense that it's hard to get young people interested in this industry. And we have to do a better job at that because it is a good industry to work in. We've done, the port here has about a $53 billion annual impact on the state of South Carolina. $53 billion. 1 in 10 jobs in the state are indirectly created by the port. The average wage of people that work in the port is about 40% higher than the average wage in the state. So it's an area where we really need to grow jobs, and it's an area which improves the standard of living if we do more of it. And obviously if we coexist with a beautiful town like this. So you can imagine the port being somewhat of an industrial activity, and it coexists with the number 1 or number 2 city in the world in terms of tourism, in terms of attractiveness to visit. So we have to be very conscious about how what we do impacts the city, how we have less trucks on the road, how we can time things to not have traffic, things of that nature. So the port can coexist with the city quality of life-wise if we're smart. So with that, Pierre, I don't know if I've used up about my 30 minutes, I think. Do you want any questions, or do you? Yeah. Yes, sir. Someone need that? Okay.
¿Ya?
Yeah.
Muy bien. Soy Miguel Franjul de la República Dominicana, un país que, como muchos otros del Caribe también, depende de sus puertos para la dinámica económica. Observando estas gruesas inversiones que se proyectan para los puertos de la costa este y otros también de los Estados Unidos, preparándose para recibir los nuevos buques cargueros, ¿en qué medida un rezago de los puertos caribeños, los puertos latinoamericanos para ampliarse puede malograr este esfuerzo de hacer hacer un buen flujo de las mercancías que llegan acá y que ustedes exportan hacia otros lugares? Es decir, ustedes se amplían acá, pero el resto sigue igual.
So we are expanding a lot. There are 4 major ports on the East Coast that will handle most of the increased volume to and from the Panama Canal. And we have seen over the last 15 years a migration of cargo, particularly with Asia, more coming direct to the East Coast. In the year 2000, it's about 85% West Coast, 15% East Coast. Today, it's about 65%, 35%. And that's solely because, number one, 70% of the population in our country is east of the Mississippi River, so it's cheaper to come here all water. There's more manufacturing here, and because there have been some port disruptions on the West Coast that have driven people to diversify their risk. So we believe that there's enough growth to justify the investment. We also believe that moving freight via the Panama Canal. Number one, Panama is building a big logistics hub in Panama. When the Panama Canal comes here, they're always conscious of saying, it's not just a canal, it's a whole shipping system, logistics system, which will encourage the growth of trade within this region. I mean, we believe in trade within this region. Certainly the growth of container handling in Panama. Panama is 7 million TEUs alone in terms of cargo handling. It's huge. That will encourage trade relays in Panama to other parts of Latin America. Also big trade between the U.S. and Brazil. We have today 5,500 TEU ships going in that trade. We're talking about 10,000 TEU ships in 2 years. So we're bullish on trade with Latin America. In other words, it's not just Asia trade that we're doing this for. It's if you look at West Coast, East Coast, and Gulf ports, there's more volume in East Coast and Gulf ports than West Coast ports because of trade with Europe, trade in Latin America, and elsewhere. So we're not just basing it on Asia growth, but we do think what's happening in the Panama Canal will further increase the volumes here and makes our investment worthwhile. And the only thing that could change that if for some reason China stops growing at all. I mean, we were used to 10% growth in China. It's now maybe down to 5%. Some people say it's not even 5%. It's all a mirage. I mean, we don't really know. But I'm not that pessimistic about it. So I do believe the world will continue to grow, continue to take advantage of the economic benefits of that. So I hope. And if I'm wrong about the investment, I won't be speaking to you next time here because they'll have a new port director here. But that would be too late then, obviously. But anyway, that's just a bit of a sad joke. So I hope that answers your question. Another question, anyone? Yes, sir.
Hi. This is Eduardo Quiroz from La Estrella de Panamá. Can you imagine, sir, how interesting is your question, your presentation about the Panama Canal for us as a Panamanians? I have a question. Do you say that the expansion, the Panama Canal expansion, will be a game changer for the industry? Can you elaborate a little about one or two specific points, how the expansion will be a game changer? And the other point, 2 by 1, is do you have any position about the Nicaragua's canal?
Yeah, I'll answer the second one first. Is anyone here from Nicaragua? Yes? Okay, so I think that it will be very difficult for a canal in Nicaragua to compete with the Panama Canal. And I'll tell you why. It's a $50 billion investment, 50 billion. The Panama Canal expansion is $5 billion. It really does not convey any time savings, meaning that although you get quicker to the entrance of the canal, it takes 36 hours to cross that canal versus 10 hours to cross the Panama Canal. So you don't save anything in transit time. And there's really no logistics infrastructure there if you compare it to Panama. So the Panama Canal is, the canal in Panama is a whole logistics ecosystem, if you will. It's been built up very cleverly over a course of years. And I just think it will be very hard for another canal to compete with that. There's also the fact that the Panama Canal has actually the possibility to very cost effectively make a fourth set of locks on the other side of the third set of locks to handle even larger ships, up to 20,000 TEU ships. So most people in my industry in shipping do not think the Nicaragua Canal will happen. It's done by a Chinese investor. It's not done by the Chinese government. So we're a bit skeptical about that. People in shipping, by the way, are often wrong and never in doubt. So there is hope that I'm wrong in that if you're from Nicaragua, for sure. So what makes the Panama Canal interesting, besides the fact, again, that a $5 billion investment was approved by less than 100,000 people. And we know Alberto Alemán very well. We know Jorge Quijano very well. They've all been here. And we've heard in detail the story of the Panama Canal. It's just an incredible effort to bring this to consensus to build that canal. But what essentially the Panama Canal does, there are three major east-west trades in the world: Asia-Europe, Trans-Pacific, and U.S.-Europe. And the Panama Canal removes the size restriction on the Trans-Pacific trade to the East Coast. So you can handle as large a ships to the East Coast as you can to the West Coast, and that improves dramatically the shipping economics to the East Coast, because it's about $400 or $500 a container cheaper to run a big ship than a small ship. So the new Panama Canal brings a lot of efficiency to deploying big ships to the East Coast, and again, that's closer to where people live. And shipping is the cheapest per mile cost of any mode of transport. So that, I really believe it's a game changer. And again, it adds to the whole logistics supply chain ecosystem, which is the really amazing thing to see in Panama today. When you see how that has developed over years, I'm very impressed with what's been done. Yes, ma'am.
Soy María Elena Barrios de Panamá también, y tengo una pregunta relacionada más que todo con el sistema logístico. Panamá se está adecuando con los puertos, con el canal de Panamá, pero el sistema de puertos y todo lo que representa el sistema logístico, muchos consideran que nos estamos quedando atrás. En ese mismo sentido, países como Colombia sí han adecuado sus puertos, y el puerto de Mariel en Cuba también. Entonces las dos preguntas son: ¿qué piensa de la adecuación logística en Panamá que debe acompañar esa ampliación del canal? ¿Y cuál es la relación de los puertos del sureste de los Estados Unidos con el Mariel, con Cuba ahora, y qué se proyecta para el futuro cuando cambie, si cambian dentro de poco la situación de Cuba?
So it's a very good question, as all of them are. What is unique in Panama is the tremendous amount of cargo that is transshipped in the ports. Not a huge local market percentage-wise. So if you look at the Balboa container port, I think it handles 2.5 million TEUs, so it's bigger than us. And it does it on 17-hectare footprint, 50 acres. We have 400 acres under operation here. And that's because the cargo, a lot of it comes in and out as transshipped. So that's one aspect. The second is that you have the railroad in Panama, which actually moves a lot of containers from Balboa over to Manzanillo to get back on ships. That will not be needed as much anymore when the Panama Canal is deepened. The Panama Canal today is a constraint on the load factor of ships because there's only 40 feet of draft, or 12.6 meters or so, basically. But I mean, you have built a lot of new terminals in Panama. I think your terminal infrastructure is quite good. I think it is in Colombia as well. I think it's a mixed picture in this country today. What you have in this country today is a lot of, in a port like Los Angeles and Long Beach, which is a landlord port. So there are 14 terminals in those two ports, and none of them are big enough to handle the big ships. So instead of having 14 terminals of 35 hectares, they need, 5 terminals that are much bigger, because it's like putting a big plane in a small airport with only one jetway. It's a constraint. So the ports in this country have got to be optimized to handle the flow of goods, because there's very little transshipment in this country. Most of the cargo goes out by truck, goes out by rail. And the whole rail infrastructure, the connectivity to the ports, truck connectivity, and just the sheer size of terminals. You try to work a 14,000 TEU ship in a 35-hectare terminal, that's a problem. So you need big terminal footprint. So we probably have more challenges in the sense that our terminals are older. I mean, you just did a concession in Panama to the PSA, building another new terminal or expanding the Balboa terminal. So you have had the advantage of building new terminals, which I think are better equipped to handle the volume. So another question, or one more? No more? Okay, thank you. Muchas gracias. Realmente una charla que concatenó muy bien con la anterior que tuvimos en Panamá. Ya estábamos hablando con el señor, explicándole lo que había sido aquella plática con el director del puerto de Panamá. Así que muchas gracias. Ahora una última cosita para todos, algo muy importante. Todos los años, desde hace una década tal vez, la CIP instauró el premio presidencial que otorga el presidente ya casi saliendo de la CIP a alguien que él pueda reconocer, agradecer o que lo ha inspirado o que ha sido su mentor. Así que, si por favor, Gustavo. Just a few words. This is going to be the presidential award given by Gustavo Mohme to somebody who he considers that has inspired him or was his mentor or just simple he has to thank and recognize.
No se asusten, va a ser muy breve, muy corto. Voy a hacerles una muy breve confesión, ya siendo este el último día de mi gestión en la presidencia, y es que no soy periodista de profesión. Me hice, tras la repentina partida de mi padre, yo manejaba en ese entonces la administración y la gerencia del periódico, y tras la muerte de mi padre, pues tuve, por una decisión familiar, que asumir la dirección. Y ante la ausencia de él, a pesar de que me inculcó sólidos principios y valores, pues francamente me sentía un poco desorientado en cómo acometer la complejísima tarea de manejar un diario y dirigir un diario como La República, en ese entonces ya muy activo y un referente nacional. Y recordé, que tiempo atrás había conocido en un viaje a Francia a un curtido periodista, un viejo y curtido periodista, que despertó mi atención, posteriormente mi admiración, y finalmente, con quien finalmente desarrollé a lo largo de los años una entrañable amistad. Este periodista, me refiero a Enrique Sileri Gibson. Él nos dejó el año pasado, a los 83 años de edad, murió víctima de un penoso cáncer en agosto, y se ha convertido desde luego ya en una leyenda del periodismo peruano. Es un referente para las nuevas generaciones y para quienes lo conocimos y compartimos con él sus sueños y sus esperanzas. Muy brevemente, nomás le cuento que Enrique entró al periodismo un poco de costado, como yo. Él era el gerente comercial de la empresa cuando su madre, la gran Doris Gibson, dirigía con una férrea mano la dirección de Caretas. Años después, él asume la codirección para finalmente tomar la dirección tras la muerte de su madre. Enrique, en octubre del 68 ocurre el golpe de Estado y en el 69 sufre la primera deportación que tuvo en su vida. No fue la primera, pero fue la primera en aquella ocasión. No fue la única, perdón. En 75 los militares vuelven a deportarlo por segunda vez, esta vez a Argentina, que vivía en esa época ya la guerra sucia de Videla. Años después, Enrique, recuerdo que comentaba en alguna ocasión que cuando llegó realmente tuvo muchísimo temor porque le dijeron, ¿qué haces acá? Aquí estás, te van a matar, ¿no? O sea, así estaban las cosas realmente en esa época en Argentina. Entre el 68 y el 80, Caretas fue cerrada 8 veces. 8, así como lo escuchan, 8 veces. Era producto de sus portadas, de sus notas y de sus permanentes críticas y su ironía y el coraje con que enfrentaba las notas. Batalló mucho contra la dictadura militar, pero también cuando asume el fujimorismo fue el primer medio que denunció la presencia de Montesinos y que mereció juicios, ¿no?, en el Poder Judicial y una sentencia casi histórica negativamente en el sentido de que no podía mencionar a Montesinos nunca más. Por supuesto que no le hizo caso, ¿no? Y bueno, Enrique ha sido, tiene una de las revistas más prestigiosas de Latinoamérica, Ha sido presidente del IPIS internacional, ha sido premiado y condecorado en diferentes instituciones, y yo quería simplemente en este último acto de mi presidencia recordarlo. Lamentablemente su hija Drusila, que venía desde Connecticut por tierra, ha sido una víctima más del huracán Joaquín, canceló su viaje, asustada por las circunstancias, no pensó quizás que el día de hoy ya estaría mucho más tranquilo, y anticipó su viaje a Lima, Perú, de manera que voy a hacerle yo entrega a en mi país. Felizmente llego allá el último día, voy a hacer la entrega de este premio a ellos personalmente en la revista, me tomaré el tiempo de hacerlo. Simplemente quisiera pedirles a ustedes, digamos, que me acompañen en este homenaje que dice fundamentalmente: la Sociedad Interamericana de Prensa otorga el premio presidencial al maese, así le decía yo, Enrique Sileri Gibson, tenaz y valeroso defensor de la libertad de prensa. Muchas gracias.